Hi everyone, my name is Gabby and I'm a double major in business administration with a concentration in management and Spanish with a minor in journalism. And I'm also a member of the University Dancers Company here on campus. And this summer I used my Civic Fellowship to intern at Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, which is the first major Black modern dance company in the United States, founded at the height of the Civil Rights Movement in 1959. I worked as a development intern on the institutional giving team, so this meant I was relating with foundations, corporations, and government entities, doing things like report writing, proposal writing, lots of data entry, and interdepartmental work. But beyond that, as part of my Civic Fellowship, I investigated the historic organization's connection to social activism. And my faculty mentor is Alicia Diaz of the Department of Theater and Dance, who is committed to activating dance as a tool for social change. So I want to show a short clip. This is Ailey's Revelations, their most famous ballet. So the company has been an inspiration to me throughout my dance career. Ailey is like the cream of the crop, and so getting to work for them was really a privilege for me. And it's a company rooted in its history. Founded by Alvin Ailey in 1959, the founder, Mr. Ailey, claimed that he was not a separatist, and he was really adamant about this, but he was an activist. He created this space for Black bodies on the concert dance stage and incorporated the roots of African culture to portray this message that Black is beautiful, which was very radical for the time, as you may have guessed. And as you may or may not have been able to hear in Revelations, Mr. Ailey used spirituals, which are songs that originated during slavery, and he later in the piece portrays images of the Black church, very prominent images that are his blood memories from rural Texas, in a very positive and celebratory manner, which again is a form of activism in itself. But as you can see by these figures I've included, what was once very activist and radical has now been popularized into one of the most popular modern dance companies in the world today. So the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater is the company, but I worked for Alvin Ailey Dance Foundation, which is the 501c3 nonprofit. And so I wanted to present the mission of the organization because it really guided me in all of my work this summer, so if you wanted to take a few moments to read over that. And what I've highlighted are some of the key points that I think are representations of social justice and social activism in its mission. Last week, a choreographer named Camille A. Brown was here on campus, and she is a Black female choreographer today, who some may refer to as the modern day Alvin Ailey. And she said, activism is about a community raising awareness and not giving up in the midst of opposition. So Ailey has been empowering Black dancers since the 50s, and the company is a platform to not only tell stories about the Black experience, but the foundation is a way to educate communities and bring them together. And through specifically arts and education, which I'll touch upon later in my presentation, the organization also gives children from marginalized communities access to dance as a tool for expression and relief, but also accessibility, which is something I'll get into. And this is just a quote from Ailey: "Dance is for everybody," and this is something that's really emphasized, especially in arts and education. So these were my guiding questions that I worked on with Professor Diaz. The first specifically pertaining to the relation between dance and social activism, which is something that the regular person might not think about a linkage, but as a dancer, it's something that I'm constantly thinking about. And then the second was more related to my day-to-day duties. How does the corporate structure reflect, if so, the mission of the organization? Does things that are happening on the ground in this type of social activism actually occur internally? And I was a part of that. And for more context, this is the structure of the organization I was given in my onboarding packet as an intern. So the arrow over here points to the managing director of development. So He was my highest boss, of course below the executive director, but 2 tiers above in seniority, my site supervisor, and then all the way to the other side in the pink is the company, Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. So I just kind of also wanted to show the gap there was between me in the office and the company itself, who were often rehearsing on the 6th floor, off limits to most of the staff. And conducting my research, traditional pre- and ongoing research with literature and news articles, meetings with my advisor as frequently as possible, overall observing my surroundings. Every interaction was learning experience for me. But the bulk of my project were these reflections that I worked on, guided by my research questions, and we're going to dive into one of those today. So the reflection I wanted to talk about, I titled Dancers, Social Justice Warriors, and it directly related to that link between dance and social justice. So it talks about a day where I did something different. I went out of the office to Ailey Camp in the Bronx on a site visit with some fellow staff and donors. And Ailey Camp is one of the organization's signature arts and education programs. It happens during the summer. It's a 6-week program for children ages 11 to 14 from often marginalized communities, kids from New York public schools that don't have access to these kinds of programs. And it's completely free. So it's all about accessibility. And I observed the curriculum, kind of a day in the life at Ailey Camp. And of course there's the dance component, made up of ballet, West African, modern, and jazz, which reflects the core curriculum of the Ailey School and the Ailey Company, West African being a specific highlight that Ailey focuses on. But for ballet, I really had a great experience watching the ballet class, as ballet is historically and pedagogically very Eurocentric by nature, because that's where it comes from. And so watching Black girls in a dance class having a really fun time with what they were doing, especially not being a formal ballerina myself, was something that made me really happy. And in creative communications, which was a non-dance component of the curriculum, it was a visual arts class. They were working on self-portraits on the day I visited, and they were led by a quote from Zora Neale Hurston that says, "I love myself when I'm laughing, then again when I'm looking mean and impressive." And this kind of guided their lesson for the day. They also brought in artists, prominent artists of color today, such as Kehinde Wiley, who is very relevant to the Richmond community right now, which was just another form of accessibility, not just in dance, but across all art forms, which I thought was really cool and essential. And then there was an all-boys percussion class. I'll show a photo of that in the next slide, but they were focusing on West African drumming. And Ailey as an organization is really attempting from all angles to defy the stigma against boys in dance. And to me, this is a prime example of social justice, because they're attempting to create an equitable space, or giving a space to young boys to dance in a society that may be telling them otherwise. And they were led by a male teacher, which added another layer of accessibility, where they could see themselves in the future, or see a realized version of themselves that they may not have had access to before this class. And then what struck me the most about the day was the personal development course. So I walked into a classroom, and it was the campers and an instructor sitting down in a circle, not using the desks, and they were playing hygiene habits and mental health bingo. So they were talking about things like self-care, but also bullying and self-harm, and really important topics that children need to be exposed to and learn about that they might not be getting in their school curriculum or in their homes. Something that I wasn't really talking about when I was ages 11 to 14 in a private school. So this really was an important thing to me. They also had these affirmations that they said daily that were just, promoting self-love and confidence, which was a really great thing to see. I have a video. So this is their West African class on the roof of the school where it took place. The genre of dance is called cuckoo, and as you can see, there are live drummers. And this was one of the first weeks of the camp. They already looked pretty good together, so they were really talented. And then this is the all-boys percussion class, and they did the bucket style of drumming, and I learned that the bucket style actually originated in the Bronx, so it was really cool to see this come full circle. And then they culminate in a final performance. So this is a highlight from the final performance in August. All their friends and family come to watch them. And as you can see here, there's really prominent imagery of Black culture, the afros, the music, the jazz style, and in a celebratory manner on top of that. And here are the boys. This is the finale dance. And it was a very lively atmosphere. Everyone was cheering along. And what the coolest part is about this final performance is, again, that accessibility and the access to the image that these children can see themselves as having and rising to the potential, maybe not just through dance, but as a performer, as somebody that can be confident on stage, an image that they may not have pictured themselves as before because of their surroundings. So that's the best part about this final performance, and they did extremely well. So my conclusion, just from this sample reflection, among many other conclusions that I came to throughout the course of the summer and after the fact, was that Ailey Camp and Ailey Dance Kids, which is another arts and education program that is basically like the Ailey Camp throughout the school year in residence at different New York public schools and Newark public schools, was that these were the most clear representations of the connection between social justice and dance that I observed this summer, and some that I've ever observed in my lifetime. And I said this in one of my reflections, but I wanted to present it because it kind of wraps it all together. But I said we can't predict that all of these young people will become civic leaders or policymakers or educators, but that's not the point. The experiences and knowledge they've gained from that summer as a kid when they danced will shape them and at least inform them of ways they can support, create, and teach others social justice. So thinking back to that class about Black artists, that class about self-care, they're learning these tools perhaps for the first time and can cite dance at Ailey as a reason for that. And I wanted to end with remaining questions because this is how I ended most of my reflections. Further research project is never really closed. There's always that bridge between theory and practice that you have to keep pushing toward, especially because I'm a company member in University Dancers and am currently in residence in a Camille A. Brown piece, that choreographer I mentioned earlier. And so constantly in the dance studio and outside, I'm still learning about that connection between dance and social activism. And related to that, one of my questions is, what does this look like apart from Ailey? I saw it from a very narrow lens, and going into Ailey, I was a huge fan, and so it was kind of difficult to me to apply that criticism. But there are smaller companies who may have came out of the idea of Ailey because the company was a trailblazer in what they're doing, but are more modern applications of how this intersection comes together and doing perhaps more for different communities than Ailey is, and how can Ailey, remain relevant 50-some years later as a mover in social justice and dance. But yeah, so thank you guys for listening. That wraps up my presentation. And I'm also looking forward to choreographing a work based on my experience in the spring that I'll present at the end of the year. So again, it's just like an ongoing thing for me, but in terms of today, that's all I have.